Good morning. So today we are going to learn about the requirement engineering. So before we are talking about the requirement engineering. So if we recall the steps of software development life cycle, so we have the requirement analysis, design, implementation, testing, and evaluation. So you can see that in the SDLC, the very first step is all about this requirement analysis, right? So the requirement engineering is the major part of this requirement analysis, or the SDLC's first step. So usually you know the definition for the requirement. So the requirements will tell you what a system must do, right? So when it comes to the software requirements, it's a sort of description of different objectives or the feature list of the system, right? Or it can be either a function or activity, etc. Right? So usually the requirements comes from the user expectations. In some cases, like if you are developing your own software, so then your expectations become requirements, right? So in that case, you will be the user, right? So the case is these requirements or the user expectations can be visible to everyone, or in some cases that can be hidden, don't know, unknown. Some are expected directly, but some are not expected from the client point of view or the user perspective, right? So when it comes to the learning management system, LMS, so obvious or the well-known or expected requirement will be helping to do the learning and teaching process, right? Requirement engineering. So in this requirement engineering, right? So we are basically gathering software requirements from different clients, and we analyze them, and we produce a formal document called system requirement specification. So this entire gathering, analyzing, and documentation process is called as requirement engineering, right? So when it comes to your final year projects, so you have to you are doing some sort of literature survey in order to identify what are the possible requirements of your system. And in some cases, you are gathering from your supervisor, you are thinking in, if you are the user of that particular system, right? So actually and you have done this requirement engineering, but the point is you never ever think that is belongs to requirement engineering, right? So the reason that we need requirements is in order to understand the what is required from the software, we need requirements. And also requirements will be the one of main thing that is communicate with development team, right? And also you need requirements in order to control or assure the quality of your system. So the need of this requirement engineering, the proper way of gathering requirements, analysis and creating the documentation is this, right? So assume like customer is explaining that he want a thing that can use by 3 people at once. And the project leader will understand in this way. And the architecture, the designer people will design in this way. And the programmer will write the code into this way. Right? So, and then the marketing team will, or the business consultant will describe. This is not just only a swing, but it has a cushion chair also. But the documentation part is nothing. No, nothing is documented. And the customer billing was something similar to building a roller coaster. But actually, the customer wanted this, right? So, in order to minimize each and every communication or the whatever issues, understanding these kind of issues, right? We need requirement engineering, right? So customer will explain in this way. The team has to realize that is the customer is telling about this. So in order to achieve that one, we use requirement engineering. So we have different requirement types. So in the main way, we have functional, non-functional, external interface requirements and system features, right? So the functional requirements usually is the, like the word said, functional. It describes what are the functions of the system must do. And when it comes to non-functional requirements, so it's something like additional requirements that is offered from the system. For example, loading a web page in 1 second, so that would be a non-functional requirement. And then we have the external interface requirements. So these external interface requirements is also a subcategory of functional requirements, right? So they are usually used in the embedded systems or IoT systems. So if you have both hardware and softwares, right? So for example, when it comes to the ATM machine, so you know we have a hardware device called ATM machine, and you have a very nice user interface, and then again you have a software and it's connecting to all other banks, right, through a communication. So these external requirements basically illustrate how your product is interfacing with each other component. Right. So then we have system features. So the system features is again a subcategory of functional requirements. So these requirements are needed in order to operate the system. For example, you have seen that when you install some application for your computer, so it's saying the Windows operating system should be, let's assume 7 or upward. So it implies that in order to operate or the functions your target system well, you should have at least Windows operating system 7, right? And these are some examples for non-functional requirements. So we can have speed, size, ease of use, reliability, robustness, portability, etc. And when it comes to the requirement engineering process, right? So first thing is you have to do the feasibility study. So at the end of the feasibility study, you will producing a feasibility report. So based on the feasibility report, you are starting the requirement gathering and the analysis. So we can call requirement elicitation and analysis, and that will produce system models, right? DFDs, etc. And then you have to, based on the system models, and you will be developing the requirement specification. So the requirement specification will produce user and system requirements. And then once you have developed this requirement specification, so you have to validate your requirements, and the system models, user and system requirements, and the valid requirements will goes for the final requirement document. Right? So we will go through by one. So the feasibility is basically uh, some sort of detailed study whether we investigate the market, maybe the society, or other different aspects, whether that the target system is able to develop or the feasible to develop. හදන්න පුළුවන්ද කියලා බලන්න. If you cannot develop your project, that target project, so the feasibility study will fail. And then, so once the feasibility study says yes, this particular target system can be developed by right? So then you can start the elicitation step or the gathering requirements. Right? So we can gather requirements on different techniques, right? So we can extract requirements or the information from existing system documentation that is similar to the literature survey that you have done in your final year project, right? And then you can go for the do the market surveys, and you can directly talk with customers, etc. Right? Anyway, when you gather the requirements, you should consider all different types of the stakeholders of the system. That should not be only the consumer or the end user. Right? So the elicitation techniques will be interviews, questionnaires, site visit, document reviews, prototyping, and remember to use WH questions always, right? What, where, when, why, and of course how, right? Then you can gather the requirements. So then we have a document called software requirement specification. So usually in the industrial, people will call this document as SRS. So this document is usually created by the system analyst. So system analysis will produce this document once the elicitation is completed. Right? So this SRS will tell you how the software is interacting with different other hardware, software, UIs, and then the operation speeds, response time, maintainability, etc. Even the quality aspect is also covered. Right? So usually the requirements are received when you gathering from the clients. So these are in the natural language, not in the formal English language, right? So the system analysis have to extract the necessary information and convert it into the business or the formal English and added to the SRS. So usually SRS have different features. So in general, like we have ACM standard, we have IEEE standard, etc. Anyway, so the user requirements will be in the natural language, right? So usually the technical requirements like the operating environment, etc., are expressed in the formal English or the structured language. And if you are adding different design descriptions, so these should be in the pseudocode format, and you may include the format of forms or even the UI screenshots or wireframes or etc. And if you are like developing the DFTs, you have to use either conditional law and mathematical notations. When it comes to the software requirement validation, right? So once you have once you have gathered the requirement and analyzed the requirements and converted into the technical language or the formal English language, so you have to validate the requirements. In some cases, there can be illegal or the impractical requirements. So in that case, you have to go for an expert and you have to do the requirement validation, right? So this very simple example, right? So you have different ideas in your when you are doing your final year project, right? So these ideas you have like converted into a what we call requirements. But when you and you are not sure whether these are practical to do or necessary to do. So in that case, you go for your supervisor, either your whoever senior person who has the expertise, right? Then you have asked. Then once you have asked, they will say this is impractical solution or this is not valid requirement, etc. Right? So this is the very simple example for the requirement validation. So if you do not, if you don't do the requirement validation and continue project, at the end of the day, once when you find the issues, that would be too late. Usually when it comes to the requirement validation, we will check whether it can be practically implemented, is it complete, is it clearly demonstrated, are there any what we call unclear situations, right? Or double meanings, etc. And then finally we have to manage the requirements. So in under the management requirement management, you have to do the documentation analysis, tracing, prioritizing, and agreeing with the requirements with your stakeholders.